Finally tonight, a story about a bunch of guys who did something pretty important and pretty impressive. And yet for a long time, a lot of the country didn't know much about it. Well, now they do. They've been honored, they've been recognized, and tonight we get to hear from them. Ruth Ezell has more of your stories of World War II.
Walter Fielder of St. Louis, he's the man in the middle, was not at Lambert Airport to catch a flight. But his contribution to the history of flight is what brought him here, along with other surviving members of the Tuskegee Airmen.
These men fought fascism while they fought racism. And it is extraordinary when you think about what their day-to-day lives must have been like.
In July of 1941, 5 young Negroes made aviation history at Tuskegee, Alabama. These 5 men were the first of their race to graduate under the Army Air Force's newly organized plan for training Negro pilots.
Of all the African Americans who served in the armed forces during World War II, the Tuskegee Airmen are the most celebrated. As the segregated 332nd Fighter Group of the U.S. Army Air Corps, the airmen flew combat missions in Italy and escorted bombing raids into Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Poland. While attention has historically focused on the pilots, they're not the only members of this storied group.
For every plane that you saw that would be in the air, there was 11 men downstairs taking care of it. Each section of that plane had someone working on it, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5. Engine installation might have 8 on it.
Walter Fielder was one of those people on the ground. Fielder was a civil service employee at Fort Sam Houston in Texas when the U.S. entered the war. Spotting an unprecedented opportunity when Congress mandated an all-black combat unit, he transferred to the new training program for pilots and support workers at Tuskegee Institute in Tuskegee, Alabama. On the surface, Fielder's job at Tuskegee may not appear to be very critical, but it was. Fielder was trained as a painter, but not just any painter. What he did and what he taught others to do was how to apply a special substance known as dope to aircraft, especially those portions made of fabric. The PT-17, for example, that was the training plane of the Tuskegee pilots, had wings covered in fabric. The doping process rendered the material taut, airtight, and waterproof, all essential for staying airborne. Fielder, who refers to aircraft he worked on as ships, says he was instructed at other air bases, including Duncan Field in Texas, prior to arriving at Tuskegee. But at times, the culture of segregation made the process for African Americans awkward at best.
When I was at Duncan, they had ships that we were supposed to work on and train on. And you had guys around these ships with a chalk mark telling us what we were going to have to do, but we could not go up and touch that ship. And the whole time that I was in Duncan, I never went up to put my hands on the ship. I couldn't. They didn't allow us.
So how could you learn to do what you had to do?
That's what I was thinking at that time. And so they put me, as I told you, they put me in blueprints. I never did touch a ship in Duncan. The first place I put my hand on the ship was in Tuskegee.
And Tuskegee was like an oasis.
When you passed those gates and you walked on it, well, we could drink 3-2 beer. You couldn't drink that in Macon County. You couldn't get no kind of beer in Macon County. And then you had a bowling alley. They didn't have nothing like that in there. We had theaters, what we'd go to, and they had to sit in the back of it, or if we could get in at all. We didn't have to do that. Everything was right there for us. Our PX was giving us what we wanted on the base. But once you leave there, then you had to face that segregation.
Throughout the 332nd Fighter Group, which originally included 4 squadrons, African Americans distinguished themselves in all the disciplines related to flight. And of course, they were aviators.
Negro pilots use some of the finest training bases in the United States. The Tuskegee Air Base at Tuskegee, Alabama, was built entirely by Negroes.
The 332nd and its 99th Squadron flew more than 200 combat missions during the war. They received 3 Presidential Unit citations for air support and aerial combat. The German Air Force, which learned firsthand just how skillful the Tuskegee Airmen were, reportedly nicknamed them Black Birdmen. And while claims the airmen never lost a bomber to enemy fire have been disputed, their bravery and abilities have not. Between 1940 and 46, some 1,000 African-American pilots were trained at Tuskegee. For their wartime contributions, Fielder and about 400 other surviving members of the Tuskegee Airmen received bronze replicas of the Congressional Medal of Honor. In March of 2007, President George W. Bush bestowed the original gold medal upon the entire group in a special ceremony in the nation's capital. Fielder was there, but some of his fellow St. Louis airmen were unable to make the trip to Washington, D.C. So the Lambert Airport ceremony was held 4 months later. The airmen signed autographs for well-wishers and heard their praises sung by local dignitaries.
Thank you.
But no comments may have meant as much as those by the Vice Commander of the 18th Air Force at Scott Air Force Base, Brigadier General Darren McDew.
Your stories of courage and sacrifice and bravery and excellence motivated me to become the man I am today. And hopefully it continues to motivate many, many people to do great things into the future.